Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Hi, and welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. Today we radiate the journey home with J.M. DeBord, who is the author of Nightmares, Your Guide to Interpreting Your Darkest Dreams. This is going to be fun. Hello. Actually, you go by Jason?
Jason. Yeah, JM on my books, Jason. And more people know me as Rat Owl at Reddit than they know me by my books or my, because Rat Owl reaches millions, or Reddit reaches millions of people. And I've been known by Rat Owl there since 2009. And it's even like on one of my books, they put like a little sticker on it that said, by Rat Owl at Reddit, So it's kind of a cool online nickname that has kind of stuck with me. So,
that's kind of fun. Where'd that come from?
A friend of mine needed to remember my phone number back in the day. And he, the first 6 digits of my phone number spelled out sad owl. And I was like, I am not a sad owl. So I looked at it and I saw, well, R is next to S, and that works for the abbreviation, to the little memory trick. And I figured out that rad, there's the owl side, I identify with it because very knowledgeable, maybe wise. And then there's the radical side, which I've always embraced. I try to think outside of the box. So rad has kind of a fun, cast to it. So I'm the Rad Owl.
Well, and I should say you're also the Night Owl, because I just heard you last night on George Norrie on
Coast to Coast. Yeah. We were up until past 3:00 in the morning. But yeah, I did 2 hours with them. It was my 3rd appearance on Coast to Coast, and they very appreciative of them, because when my first book came out, they were the first major media outlet to interview me, and it gave me instant credibility as a dream expert. When George Norrie says, Jason is one heck of a dream interpreter, like it carried some weight with it, and which carried over to other media outlets that then wanted to interview me. And once it got the ball rolling, then, so I'll give some credit to George and the people at Coast to Coast for helping to launch my career.
And you've written 4 books on dreams and dream interpretation.
Yeah, since 2013. And I have 2 more coming, very large books. I started with Dreams 1, 2, 3, which is a process of dream work, from remembering to interpreting to living your dreams, which is the part of the equation that a lot of people forget. And the psychic Edgar Cayce, who was also one heck of a dream interpreter, said is the most important part of it. If you're going to interpret dreams, then let's do something actionable with it. So live your dreams is the 3rd step in the process. And then I wrote a dream dictionary, but I wanted to kind of turn it on its head. Instead of the standard formula, I wanted to teach people how to figure out the symbols for themselves, but starting from a baseline of like, you dream about a cat. Well, what could it mean? The cat could mean a whole bunch of different things if you put it into context. So I started with the standard sort of, a cat is affectionate, it's independent. Sometimes it can turn on you and, cat fight and ideas like that. But then I teach in the dream dictionary how to decode the symbols for yourself. I have a crash course in dream interpretation called Rat Owl's Crash Course. And then there's the Nightmares book. So yeah, 4 and counting. Been very fortunate.
Yeah. And dreams are something that is so universal. Everyone has them. Everyone is mystified by them. We all have certain themes that show up that we'd like to understand. How did you get started with dream interpretation?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because it gives me a chance to mention my mentor, Larry Pesavento. Okay, so go back to the early 1990s, and Jason is in college at the University of Cincinnati. I'm pursuing political science and journalism as my course of study. And I'm getting around to about year 3.5, and I'm really losing steam. And I'm finding that there were a lot of things from my past that were coming up and asking me for resolution, because I kind of left my teenage years behind me with a blood trail to follow, and in a figurative, metaphorical sense, of course. I ended up in the office after synchronicities happened to lead me to the office of Larry Pesavento, who basically said, Jason, I can give you advice for how to live your life, but I would rather lead you to your own advice that comes through your dreams. So we started in the dream work, and it was an instant, just like the missing piece clicked into place for me, because of dream work, and specifically the teachings of Carl Jung. So my mentor took me on a guided journey through all that literature, and then how to apply it to, I would bring my dreams to him, and he would help me to decode them, and then do that critical step of how to apply what you learn for the benefit of not just your life, but people close with you too. When you improve yourself as a person and realize the dynamics of how you interact in relationships and stuff, it has a lot of benefit for the people who are closest to you, and I suppose probably the world in general too. So that got the ball rolling, and it's been 30 years since then. And I've continued studying all the methods of dream work, the schools of thought behind it, starting with the classics, your Freud's and Jung's and Adler's, and then working all the way up into the modern day understanding, taking the science and also the art behind dream interpretation, because I tell people it's a lot like interpreting like an artist's image, or interpreting what a poet meant. There's things about dream interpretation that will never be rational and scientific, and we shouldn't expect it to be. So I've tried to marry the two of them together. And then what got me started was my mentor, Larry.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So your current book, Nightmares, Your Guide to Interpreting Your Darkest Dreams. Why do we have nightmares? What is their purpose?
Usually it's because there's a message that's trying to get to you, and your dreaming mind is probably already tried to use gentler methods to get the message across, ordinary dreams. And then when you don't get the message, and the situation that needs to be fixed or addressed, or the question that needs to be answered continues without resolution, then the dreaming mind starts to turn up the juice, and it can reach the level of nightmare, to be able. It's like shock therapy in a way, or if someone needs to shout to get your attention because you're not listening, it's the same sort of idea. A nightmare is produced by the same process that produces dreams. It's just that the underlying content has more emotional affect. It's more deeply felt. Sometimes it reflects the fact that the situation is maybe particularly urgent. A message needs to get across. I find this in dreams that involve health. Might have a prodromal dream that's trying to warn you of something where you're headed, and it's towards illness or disease or something, and the dream is trying to give you a warning of it, so it will really shock the pants off of you. Mm-hmm. But then again, lots of dreams that seem to be about health, like say dreams about cancer, which I write about in the book, oftentimes have nothing to do with literal cancer. It's more like the idea that something is eating at you. So the nightmare is really just a dream. Let's just say that it's like a dream on steroids, or the volume is cranked to 11. And the reason why it has to do that is because someone's not getting the message.
So, okay, this just begs the question, who's trying to get the message to you?
This is where we get back to radiating the journey home, because home in a dream, as Thomas More says, he's the famous sort of caretaker and teacher of the path of the soul. He says that the dream is a place that feels more like home than our material reality, and that our spiritual origins are in the dream. When you enter into the dream space, you're actually getting closer to where your spiritual origins are, and you're also kind of drifting away from your physical space, because you're dreaming, you're inside of your own mind, and your body is not shut down. It's still speaking to you in your dreams, but you're able to go into a space where you're communicating with spirit, in the sense of that origin where we come from as people. But there is something that's there that's waiting for us too. I mean, people who have powerful dreams can attest to the fact that there is an intelligent source behind the scenes that is engaging with you in the dream space. You may not engage with it, but it is engaging with you. And what it is, I mean, I would fall back on what Edgar Cayce said, with a lot of things that I can't explain personally because I can't say for absolute sure what it is. I fall back on Cayce, and he said that we're interacting with God. But I keep it simpler for my students. You know, I teach dream interpretation, and when I come out and start talking about this stuff to a mixed audience, I can lose people very quickly, especially the ones who were caught in the materialist paradigm. And what I just say is, it's the unconscious mind. Mm-hmm. Now, I say just the unconscious, and anybody out there that knows what the unconscious is probably laughing right now, because the unconscious is could be, it seems to be plugged into the fabric of the universe itself, and that dreams are sort of a mutable interface between you and it. You're actually reaching out in the dream space into the greater reality that our consciousness exists within. So when I say the unconscious is what's producing dreams, it's what's meeting us in the dream space, you're really talking about something that is older than humanity itself, and maybe as old as the universe itself, and possesses the same intelligence and awareness of whatever it is that created this universe. So the answer is pretty broad.
Well, I'm so glad that you went into that, because I really feel, and I, from what I've seen and read and heard, that we're in and out of the body all night and into that fabric of the universe that you described.
Well,
right?
I can give you two really interesting things about that subject. One is that when we leave the body while sleeping, it is the classic kind of out-of-body experience. Cayce said that it happens nightly, and Bob Monroe studied this in his sleep lab. Anyone who knows Bob Monroe, the Journeys Out of Body and the other books he wrote, famous teacher of astral projection.
Founder of the Monroe Institute.
Yes, and founder of the Monroe Institute. He said that he found in his sleep studies that it happens during the delta stage. And he knows that because they had him hooked up to the equipment, and he knew when he was out of body, and he was able to say when that was occurring while he was sleeping. And then they went back and referred to the EKGs and brains, this stuff, the equipment they had him hooked up to, and they could tell that it was happening during the delta stage. It used to be believed that during delta stage that this was, there was a dreamless state, but it turns out that you really are having dream experiences while you're in delta. It's just that they're so deep that the majority of people have no awareness of it. They have no recollection of those dreams at all, unless they're woken up while they're in delta, which is the deepest. I call it dead asleep. And if you wake me up out of delta sleep, you're going to get a version of Jason that's like a grumpy bear that's been woken up out of its hibernation too early. Like, I'm going to growl at you, because your body is drugged with these very heavy sleep hormones. So your body has receded as far away from your awareness as it ever is. And I think that's what leads to the out of body experience where the soul interacts with the larger consciousness system of which it's a part. Here's the other thing that's kind of mind blowing. Carl Jung said that if you go to the bottom of the psyche and you keep going, you end up in material reality. And he figured this out with Wolfgang Pauli, who was a Nobel laureate physicist. And they worked on, for over 20 years, they worked on the theory of synchronicity and tried to find a marriage between psychology and physics. And what their conclusion was is that mind is one end of a spectrum from matter, and that the psyche is the mutable interface between them. So you can journey in your mind into physical material reality. And that's what I think is happening when you have an out-of-body experience, is you're finding a pathway through your own mind to allow your awareness to decouple itself from the physical you so that it can experience the larger the larger universe out there. But archetypes are a sort of he says that archetypes are a sort of middleman, that when you interface with the archetypes, you're actually there on the back side of the archetype presents an image to you. And on the back side of it is the reality that they originate from, which is outside of space-time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's outside of material reality as we know it. We are interacting in our dreams and deep down in our psyche, whether dreaming or not. The archetypes are the foundational layer of the psyche. When we interact with the archetypes, we're actually interacting with something that originates outside of our material reality. And so I have one of the greatest thinkers in psychology to ever live, Carl Jung, and I have Wolfgang Pauli, one of the greatest physicists to ever live, who collaborated for 20 years and came up with this. So I feel like I'm on pretty good ground when I present this as their ideas, but that I subscribe to, because my experience and kind of understanding what it's like to be out of body, and having done the Gateway and the Monroe series, having worked on that and having had experiences of deep mind, hooking up into the larger consciousness system, I can say that I think that they were right. But you have to find out for yourself.
True. So these archetypes, yes, I believe that they originate outside of us, but I mean they're very real and they're very universal. And so I'm just wondering where that originates. And I mean, do we just innately plug into them?
Well, innately, because they're part of us at the foundational level of who we are. Once you understand what archetypes really are, you realize that there is something deep down inside of you that is entirely non-rational and looks a heck of a lot like a living myth, a landscape inside of you in your deep interior that is like it's a living myth. It's a place where these things take shape and form that are very different than what most of us experience in our material physical reality. And yet this is the foundation of the psyche. If you delve into Jung's Red Book, which was his chronicle of his exploration of the unconscious, you find that in his journeys deep down into himself, he started encountering these archetypal images and personalities that were independent of him and had their own awareness, point of view, intelligence, personality, and agenda. So you think that your interior world is entirely yours, and that there's nothing that's a part of it that comes from outside of you. There's an inner world, there's an outer world, and there's a hard barrier between them. But it turns out that this isn't true. And Jung and others who've explored, deeply explored consciousness and the unconscious mind and the psyche have found out that there really is something deep down inside of us that is entirely non-rational and also hooks us up into the larger kind of universe out there. I relate it to the theories of David Bohm, who is a physicist who he came up with something called the implicate and explicate order. What he said, the implicate is a universal, it's like a blueprint for physical reality that exists on the outer boundaries of the universe, and it's information. So the information for everything that's experienced inside of the universe is written on the wall on the outside of it, but it's in a two-dimensional space. We would never be able to send a spaceship to the end of the universe and actually see the implicate. But what we can interact with is the explicate, which he says is the unfolding of what is inside of the implicate. So the implicate to me is where the archetypes originate from. They are fields of information that originate outside of space-time as we know it. So when we interact with them, doesn't that start to sound a lot like interacting with God?
Yeah.
Something that's beyond ordinary reality that we interact with in a way that's meaningful, but we can't put our finger on exactly what it is.
Right. We think of these archetypes as being so uniquely human, but they're really not. I mean, when you pull it out to the level that you're talking about, that when we're interacting with something that is beyond humanity.
Yeah. And is interacting not just with us, but with everything in the universe.
Exactly. Because we are certainly not alone in the universe.
I'm glad we've busted that myth. How many centuries did it take for humanity to get over itself? At least Western humanity. If you go outside of our cultural paradigm, you find in other paradigms that they've accepted this larger reality as a given. They'd be like, does a fish question the water that it swims in? Do we question the air that we breathe? They're like, no, this is just a fact of existence, that we are part of this larger system and that there's a heck of a lot more life out there than just us. But, humans have had this we got to be special thing going for a long time, and probably originates from that thing we call the ego, which doesn't realize that it's part of a collective. Even inside of your own mind, the ego is a small player in a much bigger cast of characters. And accepting that, I think, is one of the first ways of finding your journey home, to bring this kind of full circle back there.
Yeah.
Because the home that you originate from as a conscious being is inhabited also by the types of characters that are in your dreams. Some of them are kind of conventional and knowable as kind of actors in a story, and they're symbolic. They're walking, talking symbols. Was something I use in my courses on teaching dream characters, to give people a conceptual framework for understanding what dream characters are. And then I turn around and I blow their mind with some of this stuff that we're talking about now. And I go, guess what? Some of these characters that you interact with are actually part of a larger cast of characters that exist independently of you, even though you interact with them in your own mind and in your dreams. And when you are there with them, I mean, home is what makes home special is the people who join us there. And in a way, when you enter into your dreams and you interact with those characters, you're interacting with your family, and the home that is more like the ideal. No matter what you experienced as your reality, the home that you experience in your dreams is more of the ideal that you would like to live. Because when you go into your dreams, do you always feel like you belong? The dream is a home for you,
right?
It's maybe not in every dream, but I had a lucid dream once where I realized I was lucid, and I just kind of said, I want to exist in this place for as long as I can and look around and experience it, which didn't last very long, because as soon as you realize you're lucid, you're like, but I reached out from the dream and I touched the surface of it. Like I could feel it as an energy, and I touched it, and it made me feel more at peace and at home and like I belonged there, that there was a place that was made specifically for me and the unique being that I am, and that I was in that place. And I said to myself, I want to bring this into my waking life, more of this into my waking life. I made a note. I said, I have to remember this when I wake up. I have to remember what this feels like. And the reason why is because it felt right. It felt like home.
Yeah.
And I would like for people who enter into the dream work journey to know to at least consider that what they're really doing by working with their dreams is they're trying to find their way back to the home where they belong to.
Right. And to make some sort of sense out of everything we're experiencing here so that we can bring that information back home. Very interesting.
Back to the home in our waking lives too.
Well, that too. Yeah. Okay. So what happened with this? So you set the intention.
Right.
Yes, you set the intention that you would take this place, this feeling, this energy that you encountered in this lucid dream. You set the intention you were going to bring it back home. What happened with that?
Well, it took a lot of work for me to remind myself of that as frequently as possible.
Yeah.
In fact, I bring it up a lot in these interviews because I'm speaking it to you and the viewers.
Right.
Excuse me, but I'm also reminding myself that of this fact of what I experienced in my dream life, and that the more I do that, the more that the feeling becomes part of my reality of material existence, that my existence as a being in this physical place, where I'm simultaneously here, but I'm connected to home. And I want that home to be able to communicate to me through my intuition and my feelings. Even if I don't always consciously realize what I'm doing, that's where the information is coming in. Kind of like the download I received just before we started recording. I'm like, why is my ear ringing? Okay, you're downloading something. All right, let's just clear the mind, let it come in. Okay. But that's the connection to home. Home decided to open up the communication channel and tell me what I needed to know going into this interview. So it takes a lot of reminding of yourself, though, because our training to be able to exist in this physical space makes us discount these kinds of intuitive feelings and the other sorts of messages that come to us from home, because they don't seem to be very useful most of the time. You find out that it actually is. But you have to retrain your own mind by continuing to bring your attention back to, like I did, with that feeling of home and remembering that dream. There, I felt connected to home, even being able to reach out and touch the fabric of what it was that I was inside of in the dream space, and realizing that I was in an actual energetic space that was kind of absorbing into me in a way. So yeah, that was a special dream.
I can imagine, so much more that it was what we call a lucid dream, where you really felt that you were aware in a heightened type of way.
Do you experience lucid dreams?
Very rarely. How can we experience it more?
Well, the times that I've been able to experience it on a more regular basis has been when I gave it a lot of attention. If I could go into the other room here, I won't do it now, but I have a silver coin that I keep by my bedside, and I also put it into my pocket. It's a real silver dollar. It's sort of my token to ask myself, am I dreaming right now, or am I awake? Or am I dreaming, or am I awake? And what it does is it helps you to differentiate one reality from the other, so that when I'm in a dream, I can have something that will trigger my awareness of the fact that I'm in a dream and this is not ordinary consciousness. I also do a regular exercise of tracing my memory back to what led me to right here and now.
Yes.
So there was a memory before we came on the air. I realized we were going to be on Zoom and I was unshowered. So I quickly put on a shirt and combed my hair and, did all that to, and then I'm like, what did I do before then? Well, I was talking with my partner and I was making a cup of tea. What was I doing before then? I was working on my computer and I had opened up the file for the book that I've been working on. So I'm able to consciously trace that back. But if you're dreaming, you often won't realize when you ask yourself that how you got to here and now. You go, well, wait a minute, I'm here and I'm, standing out in the middle of this field. Well, how did I get here? So if you start asking rational questions like, well, where's my car? Like if I got in the middle of a field, I must have driven here. I didn't teleport, right? And you'll start to realize that you're dreaming because you can't trace the memory chain back. There comes a point where you just like, I just kind of appeared in this space. It must mean that I'm in a dream. So it's the attention that you give to it and the desire. Remind yourself before going to sleep that you're going to sleep. This is a good practice to be in anyway.
Ooh,
but
yes.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna be dreaming next. That means the next things that I see in my mind, the next things I experience, I'm going to be seeing it in my mind, but it's going to be as if I'm seeing it through my eyes. But it must be a dream because I just went to sleep. If I can trace my memory back, oops, what was the last thing that I did? Well, I went to sleep. The battery may have just given out on this. That would be good timing. So lucid dreaming is not the easiest thing to do. Here, we'll put this back here. There we go. And so it takes, for some people, it comes naturally. And for some people, it takes a heck of a lot of practice. And I'm not a natural at it. I have some friends of mine, like my co-host on the Dreams That Shape Us podcast, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve is a natural lucid dreamer, but even he will tell you that he's a young father. He's just had a second child and he ain't doing much lucid dreaming right now. Yeah, the battery's giving out on that. So sorry.
Oh, dear.
I know. So
right.
That's the way you can lucid dream. On my channel on YouTube, it's Radow, is my channel name. I did an interview with Steve Rogat, who's a longtime shamanic practitioner, and we did a 2-part series on lucid dreaming. And we don't really talk about the standard techniques that you find in the videos and books and stuff that people put out on lucid dreaming. What he talks about is that it's a lucid awareness of yourself and your life at all times. And the ability to be able to respond, like response ability. It's the ability to respond. And that carries over when you do it in your waking life, it carries over in your dream life because you're not responding unconsciously anymore as we do in most dreams. You can respond with a higher level of awareness. So I think that is a good primer foundation for anyone who wants to learn how to lucid dream, including you.
Oh, yes, I would love to. The handful of times that has happened were fascinating and so much fun.
Yes. Yeah. It's good to have a script ready to go. The last time I really went through have in your mind what you want to do when you become lucid, because you can very quickly phase out of that level of awareness and back into ordinary dreaming unless you decide you're going to do something right away. And what I found was I love flying in dreams. And the last time I was lucid, the dream said, okay, we'll let you fly. And I was in a reclining lounge chair and I was flying through the air feet first, like going up and down and around. And I was flying through my backyard like the hummingbirds I've got back there. I've got almost like a hummingbird sanctuary in my backyard. And I wasn't that fast as them, but I was flying around kind of in that space, but on a big brown leather lounge chair with my feet up and everything. Like, it was so cool. So always allow the dream some space to take creative license with whatever experience it produces for you. But have something in mind that you would like to experience as a starting point.
I have been lately just setting the intention and giving permission for dreams to go where they will, and just really consciously and intentionally trying to dream. And it's been working really well, I have to say. Now, I do encounter a lot of people who just say, I don't dream. I never remember my dreams.
Yeah.
But we all do, don't we?
Yeah, you dream. It's a biological necessity. There are some cases where they've shown that people didn't dream, and it's usually because they had a brain disease or they had brain damage. It damaged some part of the brain that is critical for producing the dream experience. But yes, you are dreaming every night. And if you sleep for 8 hours, you're spending about 2 hours in REM stage dreaming, which is the most vivid and intense dreaming. And you're spending about 2 hours in non-REM stage dreaming, which tends to be more thought-like than experiential. REM dreams are more experiential. Non-REM dreams are more thought-like. And so that's about half the time that you're asleep, you're actually dreaming. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a lot of content to remember, and most people won't, even with really good dream memory, they won't remember even half of it. But with practice, what I've found is that everyone can start remembering at least one dream per night. So here's where it starts. When I have someone, and I've been through this many times, so let's walk them through it. Anybody out there who thinks that they're not dreaming, let's establish a baseline that you are dreaming, and not just because I'm telling you that you're dreaming, and not just because the studies and the literature and the sleep studies and the sleep labs and all that, the science says that you're dreaming. It's because when you wake up, ask yourself, do I remember anything that is dream-like? While I was asleep for the past however many hours, was there anything that I can recall that seems like a dream? I may not remember anything specific, but if you can recall something and you go, there was something happening I bet it was a dream. It kind of feels like it. And now you've established the baseline. You are dreaming. What does that mean? You're not remembering. So what you want to focus on is the remembering side. And I find that setting that intention before you go to sleep, that you're going to be dreaming, that you want to remember what it is that you're, that you experienced or will be experiencing, is very important. And then, first thing when you wake up, nothing else on your mind. To keep your mind clear and just think about, what was it? What do I remember from my dreams? Give it that attention first thing when you wake up. And I keep a notebook by my side. I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's always there. There's a spiral notebook with a pen sort of, clipped onto it, and it's there waiting for me. It's right there on my nightstand. I can grab it and I can go. I find that that's really important, because dream memory is a special type of memory that is, I call it gossamer. It's spider web-like. It's all interconnected and thready, but very delicate. And as soon as you start forming new memories when you're awake, you are overwriting your dream memories. So you want to keep yourself as still and in that gray zone between sleep and awake. You're awake enough to start acting consciously, but you're trying to keep yourself in the sleep and dream frame of mind. Because as soon as you get out of that frame of mind, then those memories become difficult to access. And if you do this regularly, you make a practice of it. I have found that almost universally, the people who say that they don't dream or that they don't remember their dreams, usually within a short period of time, I'll say maybe 2 weeks of practice, that they'll start having recall of dreams. They'll be able to write, a paragraph or two or more in their dream journal. And that over a couple of months of doing this, that you'll start remembering 2, 3, 4 dreams a night, maybe even more.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, like doable type of plan to remember these, because I think they are important. They're very important. Okay. Well, I think, we would not be doing due diligence if we didn't actually delve into your Nightmares book a little bit more. Nightmares, Your Guide to Interpreting Your Darkest Dreams. So, in your words, how would you define the difference between a dream and a nightmare?
That's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
The nightmare is a dream that has greater emotional affect. And if you want to get into a clinical definition, one thing that separates a bad dream from a nightmare is a nightmare wakes you up, but a bad dream, maybe you'll surface a little bit, but you're not going to be like shocked awake like a nightmare does. And it's because of the emotional impact of the nightmare. So the same process that produces dreams is producing a nightmare. It's just that the underlying content has greater emotional charge to it. So that's a good place to start of defining what a nightmare is.
Hi there. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you about a very special event that we have coming up with Radiate Wellness. This is the Inner Journey, Discovering Your Soul's Path 3-day spiritual and metaphysical retreat. This is an immersive experience, March 31st to April 2nd. So it's all inclusive. So that's lodging, meals, snacks, and wonderful workshops. So what are the workshops that we have coming up? First, we're going to be doing a sound healing concert with Susan Walter, who's a visionary angel artist and angel communicator who paints beautiful angel portraits. And she'll be leading us in a sound healing concert with crystal bowls, and there will be energy work alongside that sound healing. We're going to be doing a group QHHT session, that is quantum healing hypnosis technique, with me, Christy, and we will visit one past life and one potential future life, just to look at the arc of your soul and your soul's purpose. We will also be connecting to your inner self and your intentions for 2023. We'll be doing energy workshops and energy healing workshops. And we will do a meditation to meet your angel or angels and learn how to work with them. We will also have a special guest from Switzerland, from Geneva, Switzerland. Mary Jane Stodeman will be joining us to talk about your soul's journey with astrology. So our leaders for this retreat are myself, Christy Clemens Hoffman, Kathy Lesmeister, who's another one of our wonderful practitioners with Radiate Wellness, Susan Walter, who is a Kansas City-based visionary artist and sound bowl enthusiast, as well as Mary Jane Stodeman, tarot master and astrology teacher in Switzerland. So all of these events are all covered under one price. And there is an early bird special. You can save $100 on this retreat until January 31st, 2023. And then regular registration continues afterward. And again, that will be a $100 discount up until January 31st. You can find out more information and register at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. It's right at the top of the homepage. Hope to see you there.
Did you know that Radiate Wellness is more than just a podcast? That's right. We're also a comprehensive, holistic wellness practice. Find out about our services, practitioners, and upcoming events at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. While you're there, visit our podcast page to read more about our great guests and even donate to the podcast. If you like our podcast, you can help in other ways as well, like subscribe or follow us wherever you're listening right now. Tell a friend, a family member, or a coworker about the great content you find here. And if you wouldn't mind, please give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, or a positive review. Sounds like a small thing, but it really helps. You might like to know about our Facebook communities while we're at it. We have a free community, the Radiate Wellness Community, on Facebook for news and great free content. Our subscribers group is Radiate U, as in the letter U, but also, well, you. There you'll find curated replays of past classes, guest interviews, and more. And now, back to our podcast and back to our guest.
Yeah. And I know that some people have night terrors. So how do you differentiate those from just a regular nightmare?
So the dreaming mind is a translator of all input that it receives while it's running. You're asleep, and the dreaming mind is running the dreaming process, which is, by the way, many different parts of your mind are coming together and working in coordination almost identically to the way that your imagination works. If you put someone into a CAT scan and say, imagine a scene where you're walking through a field and you've got your pet dog next to you, and they bring in all this imagery, they can see all the various parts of their brain firing in coordination. And when you're dreaming, your brain is basically doing the same thing. So it's a very imaginative process. But what happens while you're in a night terror is that you're receiving an input from the body that's getting translated into symbolic imagery. Now, this can happen also if I'm digesting that bad hamburger that I ate. Well, don't eat hamburger anymore, but let's just use that as an example. Or the bad cheese that I ate before going to bed. And now I'm dreaming and it's really unsettling because my stomach's going, ugh, and it's getting translated into imagery. People have also had this happen when like they hear a siren outside and they dream about a war, but it's actually an ambulance going down the road or a fire truck, but they're hearing it, but they're dreaming, and it's being translated into symbolic imagery. A nightmare is translating the input it's receiving from emotions and memory and things like that. A night terror is a translation into imagery of the energetic release of trauma that has been stored in the nervous system. Yeah. So people who have PTSD, I find a lot of people have difficulty with PTSD. So what I say is just who have experienced traumatic stress and didn't heal from it. They didn't shake it off after the experience, which is the normal reaction after traumatic stress. If you have the ability to shake it off, then you tend to just go on with your life and everything's okay. The same as an animal that after it's been like the lion attacks the gazelle and the gazelle plays dead and it gets away from the lion, okay? And so that does actually happen sometimes. If you observe the animal, it will then, once it knows that it's safe, the first thing it does, like it shakes all that energy off of itself. What if it doesn't have a chance to let go of that energy? It gets trapped and stored in the nervous system. And then that leads to dysfunction. A night terror is the release of that energy while you're sleeping. And you're dreaming, and it gets translated, because that's what the dreaming mind does, into imagery, but it does not have conventional meaning the same way that nightmares and other types of dreams do. There's nothing that you can find in the experience where you can go as a dream interpreter, you can go, we can trace this imagery to its source in you and your life. It doesn't have the same sort of relationship through meaning. It's just bloody carnage and violence and gore and terror. And it's because it's an energetic experience, which means that the help that you bring to people who have night terrors really needs to work on an energetic level. And also a friend of mine who experienced this, it was the one that I was able to use as a sort of to find out what this really is, because we would talk about his nightmares, and I would try to help him get to the source of them. My conventional techniques and understanding were not doing us any good. And I came to understand that what he was experiencing almost nightly as night terrors was an energetic experience from the trauma of living in perpetual fear inside of his own family home, like fear of violent death level of traumatic stress. And he now it was 30 years removed from that time of his life, but this energy was being released from his nervous system night after night. So that's what night terrors are. And I do point out in my book the difference between them and explain the processes that are running and why it's an energetic process as opposed to a dream process that's happening as you're experiencing it.
That makes perfect sense. Perfect sense that the emotion and trauma stored in the body needs to come out in some way, shape, or form. Right. Now, what about sleep paralysis?
It's a normal state of affairs as you're dreaming.
Really?
Yes. When you're dreaming, your brain uses a hormone to mute the reactions of the nervous system. It's in the brainstem, so that it can mute the limbs, specifically the arms and the legs, so that they won't thrash around and act out your dream content. Although there are people who have parasomnias that range everything from like thrashing and kicking their legs all the way over to like sleepwalking. And they, so while when you're in a state of sleep paralysis, it is a normal state of affairs. But here's what happens to some people is they wake up and they're still in sleep paralysis. They realize that they can't move, and their dreaming mind starts reacting to the input that it's receiving, which for most people is some level of fear, ranging all the way over to terror. So depending on the range of what you're experiencing emotionally in response to this fact that you can't move, but you realize you're awake, the imagery, the dreaming mind starts producing imagery based on that overlays your waking reality. So there, you wake up, you've opened your eyes, but you're still dreaming. And the dreaming imagery is responding to what you're feeling. So if it is fear or terror, then you start getting fearsome and terrifying imagery that appears. A lot of people will dream about like a demon sitting on their chest. Mm-hmm. They'll see shadow figures down by their feet or around their bed, or trying to inhabit their body, like possessing them demonically. Others will see aliens. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many reports of alien abductions begin with, I was sleeping in my bedroom or wherever, but usually in their bedroom. They wake up, they realize they can't move, and that's when they see the aliens. And the alien is something for them that is an image that reflects their level of fear at that moment. When you're paralyzed, when you can't move, you realize you're out of control. Mm-hmm. And it feels like there's a force that's holding you down. So that's one reason why dreams will translate it into images of aliens, because they are the modern manifestation of a sort of archetype of the thing that is very alien to your understanding of what ordinary reality is. They are from some place that is beyond your comprehension, and they have force and power that is beyond your ability to stand up against. So when we were more religiously oriented, we tended to dream more about devils and demons and stuff because our mythology fed us that imagery and those conceptions. Modern days, we're catching more of the alien mythology that is entering into our dreams. And sleep paralysis is a big part of the experience because it's also when it's a mixture of a physical state of being along with the mental state that is dreaming. So very interesting mix of the two.
So you don't believe necessarily that we could have alien visitations, for example, during sleep?
I just don't think that they would paralyze you and terrify you in your bedroom. Anything that can come through either physically fly through interstellar space.
Mm-hmm.
We know the challenges of that. Or come through interdimensional space to be able to visit us in the three-dimensional plane. Anything that can do that is not going to enter into your bedroom to paralyze you, abduct you, and maybe do tricks on your body. There's kind of a meme, a running joke about what the aliens do to you when they probe you,
Right.
And I go, no, that doesn't make any sense. If you were visited by an angel, would it come down to terrorize you? Would it abduct you, forcefully against your own will? No. Now, can things from outside of us visit us in our dreams? Yes, they can. But I have never even heard of, let alone experienced something where it came to me in my dream space with bad intent. Okay. Other than the thing that I talk about in my book, which was something that existed outside of material reality, that was connected with me generationally and through generational trauma in my family. Do you want to talk about that? Because
let's do. It's very interesting.
This requires some explanation. Okay, so when I was a child, I had a dream, a nightmare, that there was this man following me. He was dead but alive, covered in scars, oozing power and malevolence, kind of like the Dark Lord from Star Wars. That sort of, so that he had that vibe to him, even kind of that appearance, even though the dream started right when the Star Wars movies were first coming out. So I don't think he'd even made an appearance yet. I know I hadn't even seen the movies. And the man wanted to claim my soul. Now, at 9 years old, did I know what a soul is? I mean, I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was the most important part of me. And he wanted to claim my soul, which means that the physical me would be dead and he would have the most important part of me. So, I didn't quite get away from him. I cowered in fear in the back of a store as the man closed in on me. And thankfully, I woke up at that point. And so, like a nightmare, I was, probably crying, maybe had shouted or screamed. I was terrified, but I quickly adjusted to the fact that I was awake now and it was just a dream. Okay. So air quotes there are important because I found out that there was a greater reality to that thing that I experienced. And it continued as I went into my teenage years and into my 20s, where this man would return in my dreams, in my nightmares. And then I also started feeling him congealing as a presence in physical reality. I could feel his influence. Sometimes I could even hear his voice speak through people who were highly unconscious, especially during times when I was really clicking on finding my path in life as a light worker, as a follower of Jesus, as a dream worker, and as a heart-based being. There have been a lot of times in my life when I wasn't living from that space. And that was when I was under the influence of this dark thing. He identified himself in the dream as the Dark Master. That's what he put, capital D, capital M.
Right.
And one night in a dream, after I met my mentor, Larry, and we'd been working together for a few years, and I'd been healing, getting myself together. He appeared in a dream. His minions came to kidnap me. This was kind of a standard scenario. Now, there's the minions again. They pull up in the van, they kidnap me off the street, and now I'm under their power. Well, I said, no, tell me where he is, and we're going to go have the final battle. So I appear in a glass office tower. It's a skyscraper. I'm on the top floor. It's all glass. In the middle of the room is a glass coffin, and he is inside of it. And I think to myself, now is the time to end this. And just all of the rage from what I felt like the pain that he had caused me, it all boiled over. And I grabbed hold of his neck, and my fingers are sinking into his flesh like it's like dead fish, that had that rubbery sort of feel to it, and cold. And he just looked at me, and I could hear him laughing. And it was because he was getting what he wanted, which was for me to feed on my anger. I was drawing power from anger, the same way that Darth Vader tries to get Luke Skywalker to feed on his anger, because that's the path to the dark side. I got out. That dream ended with me kind of waking up with my hands gripped around the air, but I thought gripping his neck, and I realized that it felt hopeless at that point, because I'd been struggling with this man for almost 20 years by then. And I felt like it was more than just a dream figure. Well, so I get into my 30s, and I kind of lost my mojo and was trying to find it again. And I was seeing someone who had a very deep, intuitive, spiritual sense. Things ended between us. And she said, I think that you're experiencing something that's more than just what people experience. These aren't just ordinary nightmares. This is not just an ordinary darkness. This is not just ordinary addictive behavior and big ego and stuff like that. She said, I think there's something more to this, and I'd like to refer you to someone who helped me when my husband died, and he acted as a medium to communicate between us and help us to, resolve things so that he could move on to the next life. And as crazy as it sounded, I knew right away that I had to do it. So I went to see the man he's a shamanic practitioner who was born and raised in Long Island and was one of the funniest, people, just greatest personalities I've ever met in my life. His name is Steve Rogat. And he is a creative thought practitioner and energy worker, and he's a shamanic practitioner. And I told him my story, and he went up to his guides, and he came back, and he said, this is something that happened to your family generations ago, where a woman in your family stole the husband of another woman from another family. And that woman, in her anger over that, hired a sorcerer, a practitioner of black magic, to cast a curse on your family so that the women in your family would marry tragic men. So it was just desserts.
Wow.
She stole her husband, and she said, now all of the women in your family, when they marry, they're going to marry tragic men. And she had this sorcerer cast a curse. Well, what the guy didn't know when he told that to me is that if you go down the maternal line of my family lineage, you'll see a lot of tragic men. And so he's starting to speak truths that I hadn't revealed to him. And this continued as we went into the session. He basically said, we can put an end to this, and we can do it now. Do you want to do it? And I said, yes. So he continued speaking truths about my life, my biography, seeing into my dreams, understanding what it was that I experienced, because he was seeing it and experiencing it in his own mind. And we ended up we left the body to go into a metaphysical space. And that's where we found the man who was the dark master from my dreams. And I found him as an energetic living entity that the way that it was explained to me afterwards, the best guess we have is that his power, the power that he abused as a sorcerer, also lingered with him after his body died, and it bound him to the power that he used, so that he continued performing the role of black magician and working from behind the scenes to continue enforcing the power of the curse against my family. And he told me, the shaman told me that it was one of the things that I came into this life to do, that I knew before, when I made my soul contract, that I came into this life to end this thing. And we had a moment after I was able to punch through the barrier and make telepathic contact with him. And I felt him like he was in that glass coffin in the dream, where he's just oozing this malevolence and hatred. And we talked telepathically. And the first thing he did was hit me with all of the things that he had done to me and my family to make me hate him. I could feel it all in one bundle of just raw nerve, of wound, of tragedy and terror that he had been doing against not just me, but going back generations in my family. And it was to try to get me to hate him. And my mentor had prepared me for that moment by teaching me the power of forgiveness. And I said to the man, I said, in the name of me and my family, I forgive you. Now go into the light. And at that moment, I saw this pyramid form around my body. It was 4 lines of energy that formed around my body. I'm getting chills as I think about that.
Wow.
I felt it form around my body. It was in a metaphysical space, but it was there. And I felt the energy come up from below, from the base, and it focused to the peak. And at the peak, I could look up and I could see the eye of providence. It was the eye of providence, the single eye that was right there, well, up there somewhere. And it was a presence, and it was there. And the shaman said to me, he said, in the dreams, the tornadoes are not after you, they want him. Because I'd had recurring dreams of tornadoes chasing me, and I've encountered other people who've had these same dreams, and it's in my book. Of these tornadoes they seem like they're after you, but they're actually after the darkness that's attached to you. And the eye, when its power activated, it sucked it all up off of me and removed the man from the space that he was in and took him into the light. And where he is from there, I don't know, but I've tried to contact him again. And I think he's in a different state of existence now. So I'm not talking to the Dark Master anymore when I talk with him. I think that I'm talking with a soul that's finally finding its healing. This is what happens to people who abuse their powers in that way. There are powers that you can gain of the mind and of spirit. And if you abuse them, then the consequences are pretty severe. But what I found out is that in the end, there's always forgiveness. Right. But it takes someone who was on the receiving end of the damage that you inflicted to forgive you. You know, it's kind of like when I'll see these prison interviews with someone who's like a murderer, and they're like, oh, I'm seeking God's forgiveness, and, God will forgive me. And I'm like, well, that's great. But what about the people that you hurt? Have you sought forgiveness from them? Because a lot of them, they don't. They try to skip that step. And I'm like, well, if you don't do it in this life, you're going to end up doing it in the next. Because that's karma, and whatever damage we do in physical existence must be accounted for.
Yes, must be balanced out. Now, which to me begs the question, how do past life experiences show up in the dreamscape?
It presupposes the fact of past lives, which I know are real because my dreams led me on a journey into that one. And so much a part of my life now that I'm one of the moderators of the past lives and then a separate forum at Reddit for reincarnation. I adopted both of those subreddits as a moderator because those communities weren't being led at the time, which leads to abuse and just kind of a drop off of interest and stuff. So you need to have somebody who's going to kind of babysit them, gatekeeper. Yeah. So, and so I've really explored this subject with some depth, and dreams about past lives, first of all, tend to feature imagery and other associations with the historical time period that is where you experienced life previously. Now, we start getting into a problem of conceptualization because time, past, present, and future, is all being experienced at once. Right. So there is no past, present, and future as far as what really reality is. But we seem to be on some kind of a progressive timeline with past lives. So we'll just say past lives, you're in a time period, you're seeing into who you were at that time. And you'll have dreams about it that show you important moments from that life. I found, though, that you have to use conventional dream interpretation techniques first to try to interpret those dreams, because usually I find that it's the historical aspects are being used for story purposes. The dream is creating a scene for you to immerse. It's creating a reality for you to immerse and experience. And if it has, for its own reasons, it wants to cast this thing as being in the past, it would be for the same reasons that a movie director would decide that they're going to cast this story. It's going to be in the 1800s instead of in modern day, even though they're telling a modern story. For some reason, they chose to tell the story from a perspective of 150 years ago in the past. So you have to be careful of that. So in my book, though, I give, usually with past life dreams, there will be also a recurring aspect to it. It'll be a place that you go to over and over again. There was the example that I give, and this was a nightmares, because my book is about nightmares. It's not to say that all past life dreams are nightmares, but this is how it played out. The guy dreamed that he was a Civil War soldier, and he was a Confederate, and the Union troops had overrun the battle lines, and he was out there defending his home, territory. He abandoned his post and ran to the home where his family lived. He gets there in time to see that the Union soldiers have set the plantation on fire. And that as his family members are running out of the home, they're getting bayoneted. And so he's experiencing this in live Technicolor brutality. He said that every night he would have the dream, it would start the same way, except it would kind of truncate the beginning and focus on the scene at the family home, focus on the violence that was inflicted on the family, and focus on him hiding in sort of like in the bushes, knowing that he wants to run out and die, but he can't because it won't do any good. He can't stop the carnage. There's too many troops around. If he runs out, he's going to die. It will serve no purpose. So he's experiencing a terrible conflict of wanting to save his family, realizing he can't, and then the guilt of having lived through that. And then, so he said that the dreams would keep truncating the opening scene and focusing on the later scene. And they happened over and over again. And then he turned 4 years old and they stopped. 4.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. That's what because I was interacting with him at the Past Lives subreddit and talking with him about this. And I kept I had my dream interpreter's hat on, and I kept trying to find conventional explanations for this. It's a family home. There's a war going on. Is this putting together to tell a story about some kind of conflict about his family life? Was his home a battleground? Was there something that he felt really guilty about because he wasn't able to rise to the occasion? These are the conventional paths to finding the meaning behind that kind of scenario.
Right.
Usually you find the meaning. In this case, I didn't find it. And when he said, well, these dreams all happened when I was, between 3.5 and 4 years old, and they stopped when I was around 4. And I went, man, kids can have nightmares. I mean, between ages 3 and 6, nightmares are known to start,
Right.
But with that level of complexity, to feel what a soldier is going to feel when he can't save his family, to understand that there was this thing that happened long ago called the Civil War, to know that there were these two sides that were the Confederacy and the Union, to know that the Confederate soldiers towards the end of the war had pulled the lines back and were defending their homeland from the Union troops rolling into the South. I mean, to know that people were getting bayoneted because they wanted to save the gunpowder, that was just way too much for a 4-year-old mind to come up with. And so I knew that must have been a past life memory. And that's what he believed too.
Sure.
And after working through it with him, I came to the conclusion, as I often do at the end of a session when I do dream work sessions, is what matters most is what the dreamer pulls away with at that point. Yeah. Whether I believe it or not, or anyone else believes it or not, doesn't matter. It's how they interpret their experience. And, so that's an example of a past life nightmare.
Right. Interesting. And then about the age of 4 to maybe 7, our memories of past lives truly begin to fade.
Yeah.
We forget.
It's usually by 7 or 8 years old. That's also, by the way, about children will tend to experience nightmares, and then they also fade away as we get older and we understand what's going on in our lives. We understand how to operate in this physical reality because there's a part of us that remembers what it's like to be home. The journey home, here we go again. And so the remembering the past lives also tend to fade into the background as we learn to operate in this physical reality. And that sense of of the place where we came from before we were in this physical reality, that sense also tends to fade away. But the beauty of it is that we can find it again if we want to.
Absolutely. One other thing that I did want to talk to you about is your podcast, which sounds wonderful. Can you give a little plug for it?
The Dreams That Shape Us with my co-host, Steve Ernenwine. We do in-depth interviews with people to explore the impact that their dreams have on their lives. And it's we've shown in many different ways through those in-depth stories, accompanied with the music that my co-host custom creates for the show.
Fun.
To kind of capture the ambience of what the whole thing. So it's a package deal that we put together. And like, to give one example, there was a lady who was dreaming about an old friend of hers as if she was a fly on the wall, and she would get bits and pieces of information to find out that, like, he really did get married. They really did have a baby. It really was a girl named Susie Ann. Like, she got detail after detail after detail out of her dream space that was perfectly accurate. She had dreams where it was the grandfather who was kind of a beloved friend of the family, of one of her friends who was also kind of a father figure for her. When he died, he came to her as a being of light to say, hey, it's time for me to go, but I appreciate that you were part of my life and shared with my family and stuff. So we have dreams like that. We have ones where people have been pursued by the unconscious and gave them a mission in life. We have ones where dreams have helped people to make decisions about major turning points in their life, leaving a job, getting married, having children, moving. These dreams have influenced their lives and shaped their lives in very meaningful sorts of ways. So we have about 30 episodes out now, and it's really gaining steam. Like we're really getting a lot of responses from people who are hearing it. And now, as soon as we release an episode, we can see the numbers of people who are grabbing that and running with it because they've learned to trust us as storytellers, and because we find some really extraordinary people to interview, and it's a lot of fun. So the dreams that shape us. Yes.
And this podcast can be found pretty much all the places.
Yeah. Google, Apple, it's on Anchor FM. If you go to dreamsshapeus.com, it has all the stuff from there. The website's still kind of in development, but I have made sure that I put up all the links to be able to find it on the podcasting platforms and stuff like that. So it's been a real kind of a passion for me and my co-host, the way that it all came together, which in our 2-year anniversary episode, which was just released, we tell the story of the past 2 years, and we bring in guests who've all been, who were interviewed, who had follow-up with us. There were people who were dream workers who had clients come to them because they heard them on the podcast and realized, hey, like Catherine Lawson, Dr. Lawson is a trauma specialist. She told the dreams that she had that helped her recover the memories of early childhood sexual abuse, like rape level sexual abuse. And then somebody heard her on the podcast and ended up coming to her for her trauma treatment. So there've been people who've, in a very oddly synchronous sort of way, where this podcast is connecting in with the larger, collective consciousness and is becoming a part of it. So we're really proud of that. So thank you for asking. And
of course, and we'll put
appreciate it.
All links to that in the show notes. And then, of course, your website, jmdeboard.com, where you've got.
So use the name you see on the screen, jmdeboard, add a .com onto the end, and it can lead you to things like my books, my teachings, online classes, a lot of material that I have out there to teach dream work in a way that gives people a step-by-step process to follow. In fact, you can go to dreams123.com. So numbers 123, dreams123.com. You can go there right now, and right there on the front page is a summary of my process of dream interpretation. And then there's a table of contents that leads to about 30 other pages that go through it step by step. It was basically a book that I wrote that I couldn't get published at the time, so I decided I would publish it on the internet. And now I'm rewriting that book, and I'm going to re-release it, or I'm going to finally release it. But the bones of it are there. And it's if you want to know how to interpret dreams the way that I do it, you want a 3-step process to follow. It's all right there at dreams123.com.
I had a very interesting dream last night that I think I'm going to head over there to dreams123.com and
I hope you will, and that you will stay in touch via email and let me know if it was helpful for you. Here's simple fact number 1 that might help you with this whole process. You already know what your dreams mean. Do you know why that's a true statement?
Tell me.
Because you create your dreams.
True.
You must know somewhere deep down inside of yourself what your dreams mean because you create them. And if you create them, then the meaning is there. So that means that dream interpretation is a process of remembering what you already know. And when I present this to people in like my workshops and seminars and stuff who are new to dream interpretation, it feels very empowering right off the bat, because I'm not trying to tell them that they need to master something that they have no clue about. If I came in and I'm like trying to program artificial intelligence software, I don't know how to do that stuff. That would be starting from something that is way outside my scope of knowledge. But if you're trying to remember something that you already know, it makes the process entirely different. And so when you're trying to interpret a dream, understand its meaning, what you're really doing is remembering what you already know. And that forms the basis for everything else that I teach about dream interpretation.
That is fantastic. It's just the self-discovery, that journey back home.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah. Full circle. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. This has been really informative. I will definitely stay in touch by email, and we should do this again because you have just a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love talking about this with you. It gets right into the heart of things I love to talk about. So this has been a very enjoyable conversation. I hope that your audience finds it enjoyable and informative too.
Thank you. I'm sure they will.
Radiate Wellness is an international community of holistic and alternative healers dedicated to helping you create spiritual, energetic, and physical well-being. To learn more about our practitioners, services, classes, and events, or to schedule an appointment, visit us at radiatewellnesscommunity.com.